All right, good evening. We are ready to go, or at least I am. Hope you all will be too, because go we must. We are in Daniel chapters 10 and 11, which is a new trend if you didn't notice that from last time. We had to do a little bit of catch-up. We're doing a little bit more catch-up here, although we won't speed through anything more than we need to. I apologize for not already sending out that email that I sent that you may not have even seen. But if you have your material, I'm going to borrow whoever's this is. It would be great to use. If not, I sent an email with the digital version of it. This is a reminder, because to really help us out here, nice little graphic organizer put together, because otherwise, I don't know. I don't know where we'd end up. So that might be helpful. We won't go into that right away, but I did want to mention that. And again, my apologies if I don't have any other paper copies. Looks like all of them are out in the back. But yeah, we're in Daniel chapter 10. We got about 9 verses through. We'll finish off that chapter and then see where Daniel 11 takes us. But it's okay, because 10, 11, and 12 are all one single unit together. It's just the longest, most kind of climactic part of the book of Daniel, so it kind of makes sense that we had to break them up into chunks, but really they do go together. Before we get started, though, let's go ahead and go to our God in prayer, and then we'll jump into this study together. Holy God, our Father, we are so thankful for this time to get to be together as one family, intent on learning from you and studying your word. For we know, O God, that in you is all wisdom and knowledge, in you is all sovereignty over all the kingdoms and nations of men, and in you we put our hope and our trust, for we know that you are faithful to your promises, that you exalt the lowly and bring low those who are proud, that you set all things right, and you do so in your time. We're so thankful for your Son Jesus, who we see even in these pages here of the book of Daniel, as we study the history, we study the occurrences, but we also study, oh God, your great message of restoration, of judgment, and we long for that, oh God, for we know in your Son we may be found right. We're so thankful for you and for all that you've blessed us with. Help us at this time to have our minds and hearts open to receive your words gladly, knowing that through your gospel we can be transformed into the servants you'd have us to be and made more and more into your image. Be with us now, O God. It's through your Son's name that we humbly pray. Amen. So Daniel chapter 10 and 11, on our way over here, my wife told me, skip the recap. But I'm like, I can't do all of those, skip all the recap. I do a little bit. So we are in that vision section in chapters 7 through 12. Quick reminder, we had chapter 7, 8, 9, and then 10 and through 11 and 12. But as we look at this together, I want to do a quick reminder of the languages, because the languages tell us audience. So while chapter 7 was a vision, it was still in Aramaic, whereas chapters 8, 9, and 10 were in what language? Hebrew, which means it's to the Hebrew people, likely. Not to say that we don't have maybe dual audiences here, but as we're in chapter 10, we are picking up in what we're going to notice there, the 3rd year of Cyrus the king. This is the latest time we have recorded for Daniel, right? This is during the time of Cyrus, and guess what? During Cyrus's 1st year is when he let the people start going back to the land, going back to Jerusalem to start rebuilding the temple. So we're going into the time that we should be familiar with, I think from our study last year, like Ezra and Nehemiah. So if you keep some of those things in mind, we're going to all sorts of kings and empires and stuff like that popping up in chapters 10 and 11 that should be familiar to us. But as a reminder with all these pieces here, these are messages to God's people. Yeah, we had all the nations, but how do we live within, these nations, these empires that are seemingly, long-lasting or against God's people? How do we live in a way where we can proclaim essentially that God is in control? And that's what we're seeing in chapters 8, 9, and 10. We saw in chapter 8 that little horn that's going to cause persecution will be destroyed. We saw in chapter 9 there, the 70 weeks vision, that the temple, even though it doesn't seem like it right now, will be restored. And so with those two facts in mind, knowing that that will happen, we can rest assured that we'll see something similar in chapters 10 through 12. We'll kind of figure out what that message really is to God's people as we go on through. But two quick kind of things that we should have in our mind. We said this before. Remember, we're looking at apocalyptic literature, looking at these visions. Pattern is more important than precision. Meaning precision, we could be pretty precise here. You're going to see that in chapter 11. But nevertheless, it's more important to see the pattern that we're seeing established, that God repeatedly shows us over and over and over again, because he's the same in his character. We see it here. One more bonus one for you, though, that I haven't talked about before, very similar. So you got your two-piece pattern, more important than precision, but also message, I had to kind of stretch for this one, is more important than mechanics. Meaning, as we get into chapter 10, you might be wondering, well, okay, how does this thing work? We might get caught up on that. In fact, that's kind of why we avoid some things in Scripture, because we're like, well, I don't really know how it works. How does that technically work? I'm just going to avoid it completely. I think you'll see what I mean when we get there in a moment. But especially when we talk about, the earthly realm versus the heavenly realm. Like, well, if God is outside of space and time, well, how does this work? I don't want us to get too caught up in that. One, because probably shouldn't for speculation's sake. But secondly, because we miss the message. So if we can keep our minds focused on message again, I think that will be helpful. But that doesn't mean don't ask questions. I want to make sure we're asking questions and not feeling like we can't. So that brings us to chapter 10. Someone want to help remind me of what we've seen in this vision so far? We read through the first 9 verses last time, I believe. What does Daniel see? Okay, a man dressed in fine clothes, which are like, okay, that's great. What's his reaction, though, to that man?
Apparently very terrified. Even the people that can't see it are fleeing.
Yes. Well, we made the comparison to what Paul sees himself, right? And all the people around him, they know something's going on. They flee. They're terrified in that same way. Yet here Daniel is kind of left alone there, but he's the only one who sees this vision while he's over here by the river. It's a messenger. Ultimately, that's what it ends up being. He sees a heavenly messenger. That's kind of why we call this the vision of the heavenly messengers there, or heavenly messenger singular. And what was Daniel doing right before this? Is going to bring one more thing to our mind, and then we'll keep reading after that. What's the context of him having this vision? Okay, he was mourning. Are we told why? Not really. I mean, we saw a lot of kind of mourning in the chapter before, but this is, a couple years later, right? Mourning over the temple maybe and praying about it, right? How it hasn't been restored. So that is the backdrop here. I don't want us to forget that piece. Say that again? The Great War. Because what does it say in verse 1? In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name Belteshazzar, and the message was true and one of great conflict. So I will say that's kind of our header for this chapter, and we're going to see what that message is. So we're going to rewind back in time a little bit from that statement, and we'll see again. So we have this heavenly messenger, and in verse 10, we're going to start reading there together. So let's read verse 10 through 17. Then behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words I am about to tell you and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. And he said to me, Do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and humbling yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision pertains to the days yet future. Okay, so help me out here. What are you noticing? I'll keep things pretty vague in general. There's a couple things that this messenger, this one sent by God, has Daniel do. even calls Daniel certain things, tells Daniel to do certain things. Well, anything stand out to you there is like, oh, we've seen this before, it seems familiar. Yes, right. Highly esteemed. Or you might also see something in your Bibles like greatly beloved. Really, both phrases are similar. And we saw that back in the previous chapter, right? As we talked, had Gabriel bringing this answer to Daniel, right? We get this picture there of Daniel being one of high esteem. Okay, so that's helpful. Make that connection there. Again, a couple of years later, nothing seems to be changed. He's not given this vision because he's disobedient. Anything else stand out to you in that section there?
Typical response on Daniel's part that people have to heavenly messengers. And that's
Yes.
fear and trembling.
Yes. Everywhere throughout the Bible, right? That is the response. So again, makes you keep in mind when people talk about, oh yeah, I was talking to God one day, or did this or that, or I saw this vision. Like, well, did he fall down and kind of go faint? Because that's really what we see throughout Scripture over and over again, right? And so certainly he is faint, but also we see this progressive standing up. He is lifted up to stand up, and he's told a couple different things, right? So this hand touches Daniel, of course, which sounds very similar to what we saw back in Revelation chapter 1. We made that connection in parallel, whether we're saying, not necessarily saying this is Jesus here, but he is the one with the language attributed to him in Revelation 1, who does this very same thing to John. He touches him. He has him stand up. He gets him off of his feet. So we can see this vision and understand the message. We talked about that phrase of high esteem or greatly beloved. So again, it seems like Daniel's doing something right. But notice, what is the thing that he's been doing right? In verse 12, the heavenly messenger points out. His prayers, right? And it's not just that he has been praying, and that's a good thing, or, we'll see if it happens. He humbled himself in doing this, and we don't know the contents of his prayer necessarily, but we do see your words were heard, and I have a response, right? And so it's kind of implied that he's been praying during this 3-week mourning time period, and now these prayers are being answered. Now, how is this different from what we saw in chapter 9 right before? He gives a long prayer there that we actually do have recorded. How is that prayer answered versus how this prayer is answered? Do you remember chapter 9? How was his prayer answered in terms of a time aspect? You have to wait a long time? You go back to Daniel chapter 9, and verse 20 says, while I was speaking and praying, and then I get this answer right away. He wasn't even really done praying, and he gets an answer right away. Do we see the same thing here? Well, we notice later. Okay, so we do have this. He was mourning for these 3 entire weeks. And then on the 24th day of the month, this is when he sees this vision. And later on, this heavenly messenger goes on to say that, but I was being withstanded by from this king, prince of Persia, for 21 days. So it's almost like Daniel was praying, and he has to wait a little bit. So meaning that his prayers weren't right. All I'm trying to point out here is that sometimes prayers are going to be answered quick. Sometimes we have to wait. I think that's what Daniel's saying here too. In fact, really that's the whole outset of this vision. Daniel is going to get this vision of things that he will never see in his lifetime, that the people are never going to see. They're going to have to wait to see this happen. Same thing with the vision of the temple being restored. Not only were they going to have to wait for that restoration, but that restoration was going to lead to another destruction, and not the kind of restoration they were thinking. And so as we see these prayers throughout Daniel, I think it's just a good reminder of seeing how God answers these prayers. But I do think we see here that it seems to suggest that his requests are in line with God's will. And that's why he's going to get these answers, right? Answers of what? We'll have to get to the vision here in a second.
Is there a connection between the
Well, how many days is 3 weeks? 21. And okay, here's a real cool thing. We'll spend too much time on it. Well, how much time is 24 days in terms of weeks? 3 weeks and like a half, right? Like three and a half. So we're going to get a lot of 3.5s all throughout this rest of Daniel. So that's interesting. But when were these 3 weeks? Starting when? Do you remember?
The day that you set your heart to understand and humble yourself.
Okay, so this is that kind of like the timer mark, right? But what part of the year was this taking place in? I know when we were talking about Ezra and Nehemiah back like a year ago or so, we spent a lot of time talking about how those dates are really important because when they consecrate different parts of the temple, it's always done on a specific day, like a feast day, and it has meaning there, just like this one does. If you go back to Daniel chapter 10, and where are we at there? Oh, verse 4, on the 24th day of the first month. What feast takes place in the first month on the Jewish calendar? You'll probably make a good guess and be pretty correct. It's Passover. What is Passover a memorial of? Okay. So deliverance, right? Freedom from captivity, which is definitely on the mind of people who've been in captivity. So that's an important time. Is Daniel there to actually take part in the Passover in the temple? No, we don't see that, of course. So that could be some mourning going on here with Passover. But also, remember, who was defeated at Passover? And that's a trick question. Pharaoh, the head of the nation of Egypt, right? The physical power, but also who? We see this repeated in Exodus and Numbers multiple times. The gods of that nation, right? So it's the physical and the spiritual powers combined. God delivers. Is God supreme over the kingdoms of men? Yes. So remember that, because keep on reading with us as we go into this next section, because what do we notice comes up here? There's spiritual warfare going on, and that's the start of what we saw in Daniel chapter 10. There's a conflict. This is a message of great conflict, of war. And so then when we get to this having to wait these 21 days or so, this heavenly messenger says that he was, or being withstood by the prince of the kingdom of Persia. What does that mean? What are we talking about here?
The devil is ruling Persia. The prince is opposite of Michael.
Yeah, there's opposition between, Michael and, this heavenly messenger. Michael comes and steps in, spiritual being, right? And there is some kind of power or force behind Persia. And it's a weird thing for us to think about, but that's exactly what we see. No, Norma just alluded to like a prince. This is a prince, right? What do we see in Ephesians chapter 2? The prince of the power of the air. We're talking about, Satan. Or we're talking about other places in Scripture. Colossians has been a really great preface primer here for this kind of language, because these are the powers, these are the principalities, or at least one example of that, right? We're going to say something, Bill? Okay. And that's hard for us to see sometimes, but when we talk about this spiritual warfare, this warfare referenced back in chapter 10, verse 1, is not metaphorical. Like, it's spiritual, so therefore it's metaphorical. No, this is actual. And I think we need to wrap our minds around that, and we often don't, because it's a weird thing for us to think about. Now again, remember, message over mechanics. How does that work? How are they battling? I don't think that is so much the important part, but the message. That who is being warred over in this situation?
Ruler of a nation.
So ruler of a nation. So just as you have the kings of Persia, there is some power behind them. And then who are they in conflict against? Yeah, God's people, right?
So you've got a war going on, like you had in Revelation, between
Yeah.
the people or those angels of God and his armies against Satan and his armies. And who's behind the world power in Revelation? It's Satan.
Exactly right.
So who's behind the world power here?
Yeah.
Why would he want to frustrate God's plan? That his son would not come into the world.
Because that's where we're leading to, right? Daniel is looking forward to the restoration of the temple. We talked about the looking forward to the coming anointed one. If we can disrupt that plan somehow, then God's plan is foiled. Well, of course, that doesn't happen because God is in control. But as we look at all these pieces there, again, he has to fight against this prince of Persia and then get help from one of the chief princes, Michael. Again, another thing where we don't have to worry so much about the mechanics. But I will ask really quickly, where else do we see this referenced in Scripture? Well, Byron already gave us one over there in Revelation. We'll look at that in a second. We talked a little bit about that in Colossians, so to say. Think of Christ triumphing over those principalities and authorities.
Chapter 2 and chapter 1.
And maybe even chapter 6 too, right? I got to add all that in there. Paul really is heavy on this language here. Because when we read this passage, we don't think this. We think Bible class where I get to put on like a little armor of God and draw the pictures, which is great for our kids to see that illustration. But at the end of the day, when we say our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, we're talking about these things, right? Against the world powers of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil. And heavenly. Satan's best lie has convinced us that what we see is reality. And not to say that it isn't part of reality, but it's also not all there is. And Daniel needed that reminder, so do the people, right? They need to understand what's going on behind them, how God has won the physical battlefield just as much as he has the spiritual. Afraid to ask, shouldn't be afraid to ask, but any questions about that? Any thoughts on that you want to build on? I don't want to spend too much time on it, but yeah.
Why did he have to have help from Mike? I mean,
Yeah.
and then at the very last verse in this chapter, it says, no one supported against him except Michael.
Yep.
So, wait a minute, aren't they on God's side? And I'm really clumsy.
Yeah, in terms of the number of forces that are at God's disposal. Again, that's where some of the mechanics piece might come into play. But yeah, or you could look at the one on the screen.
Revelation,
Yeah.
I think, makes it clear there is a war going on,
Yeah.
but it's not like photon phasers and, would blast them away. It's an active war.
Yeah.
God wins.
Yeah.
God wins handily.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that there isn't a fight.
Yeah. And it also doesn't mean that there's only like one. No. There is one enemy in a sense, but there are also, just as there's Michael and others, there's also others on that side at multiple fronts. Think of each of our individual lives, the fronts being waged war on. That's the best answer I might be able to give you there. But yeah, as we see Revelation 12 too, again, that here this war going on, really during the time of Christ, he's enthroned in this scene. That's the context of Revelation 12 there, and that being that establishment and triumphing over the powers there. Yes.
Are we going to have to fight wars when we get out of here?
I would make the argument that Daniel is already fighting a war. How is he fighting a war? Standing up for the Lord. His prayer here is his involvement, not just the invitation to be invited into the conflict, but his part and participation in it.
But in heaven, are we going to be fighting wars in heaven?
I don't think we see that in Scripture. But the piece we have right now, but one, because when we talk about heaven, we're talking about the fullness of times when all things have been subjected under the feet of Christ, right? Including death itself. If we go back to things like 1 Corinthians 15, which I think paints a pretty clear picture that, no, our fight is right now. And it is just as real as that. And when we get that into our minds, I think it helps us, but also understanding who is on the winning side of these things.
But if they're in the heavenly realm,
Sure.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
It seems to me that they should have so much power, they should be able to just react to it.
It's those mechanics things again. I anticipated some of those questions for that reason. Yeah.
We think in terms of our day-to-day, we don't run into conflict too much.
Yeah.
We associate with
Yes.
people who are members of the church.
Yeah.
But you don't have to look far.
Yeah.
I mean, in the news,
Yeah.
all over the world,
Yeah.
about people that don't understand that
Yeah.
God is going to be victorious.
Yes.
And they are contending against Him constantly.
Yes.
They may not even understand that there is a God.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they are fighting Him, maybe not aware that they are fighting Him, but many are aware.
Yes.
If you ever
Exactly.
watch kind of debates between the atheists and Christians or any religious people, you'll see that. They're battling.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right there, especially the awareness piece, because people might not be aware of whose side they're fighting on, but I don't think we're always aware of the battles going on either. Our perception is the problem over other things.
My own individual battle fighting against evil is that very same thing.
Yeah.
Every
Exactly.
day you're fighting that kind of battle.
Exactly right. Yeah, Vlad. Yeah.
If the devil knows God's power and he knows his plan, why is he trying to prevent God's plan? Logically, if we think he will know he cannot do it because he knows of God's power, then why? What's the reason of it?
Yeah, I think there's enough suggestion in Scripture to kind of show that there is a not full understanding of the picture of how God was going to accomplish these things through Christ. So we have that aspect. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's in His nature to go against that, to be accusing God's people, right? That's really what that name Satan means, to be against God's people and bring them down.
Well, Christ battled him, and He didn't eliminate him. He allowed him to still have power.
Sure.
He just fought his own battle at that time. And I see that as the battle there.
That is the battle, right? And so when we join ourselves with Christ, guess what we're doing? The very same thing we've been talking about in our Colossians class too, right? Joining with Him and His triumphing over those very things. Any other final thoughts there? Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Trying to answer the question that he had, Satan has power to do these things.
Yeah.
And he wants to win his own soul. He can.
Yeah.
It's an ego thing with him, if you will. And that's the reason.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, there's a lot of speculation we can be doing. At the same time, though, what we see is ultimately the message of, yeah, who is the battlefield? Well, waging war over our own souls, right? I think that's a good reminder all the way through. Yeah, Byron?
Go back, let's not be overly precise.
Yes.
Read
Yeah.
Revelation tells us
Yeah.
when Satan was cast out, when they lost the war in heaven, where was Satan cast? He was cast to the earth. And in Revelation it says, woe, woe, woe. Cast to the earth to make war against the saints.
Yeah.
So, yes, he loses the war in heaven, but he hasn't given up. He's going to go after us because
Yes.
we follow God. So that's why the war is now here.
Yeah. Exactly right. And we see again, yeah, as you mentioned in Revelation, who's the world power there? It's not Persia. It's not Greece, as we're going to see later on. It's Rome. And who's behind Rome? It's the same thing. So I think we need to be careful to make sure we understand it's not to say that this isn't still true to an extent. We are in this same kind of battle. I guess real quick, just to help us bring us back to the text here, but I am glad we had that conversation because it helps inform where we're going. What does this one sent to Daniel say he would reveal to Daniel? Like what is going to actually be revealed? And then what time period and group of people are we actually talking about here?
What's going to happen is Daniel's people in the latter days.
Yeah. There's the focus. That's who it's about because they're the ones in the conflict. He's not just saying, oh, here's what happens to your people while this conflict way over here is going on. It's not like you are involved in this, okay? And then latter days, that's a fun phrase we get to throw around and examine. Well, we know it's not in the past. partly in the present. I think ultimately we see, based on the context of what we see in chapters 10, 11, and 12, what those latter days end up being. That kind of culminates in, what we'll see, is really just in the future, really just a general sense. This is what's going to happen, right? Chapter 2, we saw that same kind of thing in Daniel. It goes all the way to at least the Roman Empire there. But here, just spoiler alert, we're going to get this whole focus ends up culminating not in the Roman Empire necessarily, but more so this third Greek Empire, which is kind of what we've been dwelling on, which is going to be a little bit more immediate for God's people, but still, Daniel's not going to see that. It is latter for him, right? I bring that up to say we don't have to go like end of the world with all these things, because I think history is going to define that for us in chapter 11. But again, this is specifically for God's people and what will happen to them. This is not a 21st century world that we're talking about in chapter 11, but the principles still apply. Things for us to consider. Okay. I think we're good to pause there for a second and pick back up in verse 15, unless there's any other thoughts or comments. Okay. Keep reading with me, verse 15. So when he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. And behold, one who resembled a human being was touching my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke and said to him who was standing before me, O my Lord, as a result of the vision, anguish has come upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can such a servant as my Lord talk with such as my Lord? As for me, there remains just now no strength in me, nor has any breath been left in me. Keep on reading there past verse 18. Then this one with human appearance touched me again and strengthened me, and he said, O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Take courage and be courageous. Now as soon as he spoke to me, I received strength and said, May my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. And then he said, Do you understand why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. However, I will tell you that what is inscribed in the writing of truth, yet there is not one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Okay. What else are you noticing there? Patterns? Sound familiar? Kind of just repeated the same thing that we saw before. He is left in awe over this statement. But yeah, other things you're noticing there that I think Daniel's trying to draw our attention to.
The last statement there says, except Michael, your prince.
Mm-hmm.
There's the prince of Persia, there's the prince of Greece. Michael is Daniel and his people's
Yes,
prince.
exactly. They're not left without and when we say that word prince too, that's the same word we use as commander back in chapter 8. If that kind of gives a picture there, kind of a commander of armies in that sense. Doesn't also have to mean that there aren't others with him. If you think of that sense, you have a commander who's standing against. But he's not left without support. They're not left without help. They have hope in this spiritual battle, just as there is hope in this earthly sense too. Now, they're not going to raise up an army. They're not going to have a great commander, really ever from this time onward in the terms of the physical Israel. Yet, they have this, what we see here. Other things you take note of. I don't want to spend too much time on this section because we want to introduce chapter 11 at least. But
just the concept of this heavenly messenger that maybe looks like Jesus, both awes and terrifies him in his visage, but his words strengthen him.
Yes.
I think there's maybe something to be learned there for us in being strengthened by the word of his truth.
Definitely. And that's what this whole thing is about as well. It's not meant to terrify Daniel. And I mean, in some ways it kind of should, and rightly so. But at the same time, to build up hope. And that's not just for Daniel, but for all those who would hear this message, right? And so there's comfort in that, right? We get this picture again, one in the likeness of the children of men. I'll just throw this out there. It kind of confuses me because it sounds like he's now talking about someone else. I don't know if you thought the same thing, but it likely could be the same. I don't think we need to get too caught up in that. But again, he gives us Daniel the ability to speak after becoming mute or in awe. And ultimately, he makes this comparative statement like who am I when I'm in your presence, right? What is this? Yet at the same time, he is lifted up. He is given this hope. He has a role to play in all of this as well. It's not just some bystander hoping I'm helpless. Daniel is involved in this conflict just the same. And so what does this one tell Daniel he should do? Just real quick. This is how we participate and act out when we say God is in control. This is the kind of thing that we do. That's why these actions are important. What does he say?
Take note.
Okay, so take note, or we see later on.
Plan it in your mind, don't forget about this.
You need to know this. You need to know this, first of all. You are one who's loved and esteemed, but at the same time, don't fear. So that's an important piece, right? Not fearing the reality of this spiritual warfare occurring. God is in control, so that's the first part. What else? So be strong or be courageous, right? First we say have peace. So there's peace and not fearing. That's kind of seems to be the opposite. But ultimately, the only one active command is to take courage. That leaves us with that question, well, what does that look like? How do we take courage besides just not falling on the floor? Are there other things you continue to do? And the question that we're going to see as we play out in chapter 11 and 12, what that looks like. So just drawing our attention to that, taking courage is our active duty in this spiritual warfare, I think is one key thing we need to remember.
God's encouragement to Moses was to be strong and courageous. Moses' admonition to Joshua was to be
Just the
strong
same.
and courageous.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua's encouragement to the people as he left this earth was to be strong and courageous.
That's interesting because what was their context? Why did they need to be strong and courageous? For battle, right? It's the same thing, right? We're drawing comparisons and parallels there all the way through, or we should. Okay, so he's got to go back to battle, though, because then there's a prince of Greece, which, why would that be important?
Change of leadership, changes. And he's been told it'll be a greater nation.
Okay, so one, that means Prince of Persia is going to be put down, be destroyed. So we have that piece. But then it's not like, oh, and that's the end. It's like, no, there's one coming. And then after Greece, we know what comes after that. It's like it never ends. But what's consistent throughout all of those? The result's the same, right? The result's the same. So even if God's people seem like no one's come to their defense, here's this heavenly messenger and Michael carrying out the protection of God actively and the protection to come, right? Remember who Israel is. They get to finally return back. If you go back to the beginnings of Ezra and then Nehemiah, you have all the opponents around them trying to face them and to destroy them. They don't have a great army. They don't have really any true leadership. They don't have a king. Yet we have this going on, right? Okay, chapter 10, good? Yes, Byron.
There is the idea of touching his lips.
Mm-hmm.
Something that happened to Isaiah.
Yes.
And I think that the reason mankind feels weak in the presence of these beings is they're holy beings,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We feel unworthy to even be engaged in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes strength from God to be able to allow us to do that.
Yeah.
And He has done that for us through His Son.
Yeah. And what a great point, too, because one, that's a language he uses here, but also Isaiah needed that encouragement to then take part in something very similar here. It's a giving of a message, but it is still battling over the hearts of people who aren't even going to hear him, right? Same thing here, and Daniel is going to be giving this message by passing it down to those who need to hear it. Okay. I do want us to take note in verse 21 really quickly. What does it say? However, I will tell you what's inscribed in the writing of truth. What does that mean? Writing of truth. What's inscribed in the writing? What does that imply at the very least? He's going to tell them what's inscribed in the writing of truth.
Be God's engineering and planning over history.
I mean, if it's already written down, it means God kind of knows, right? God's control of past, present, and future is on full display here. That's all we're getting at. Especially important as we lead into chapter 11, because it's like already being recorded in the writing of truth. It shows that the outcome is known, right? It's going to be in God's favor, and he is helping him see that here. Everything we're going to see is part of that truthful writing. We see the same thing in places like Psalm 139, where God has written this down before. I've even done these things. Not to say there's no free will. We're not talking about that. We're outside of time and space here, so we record these things, but we do have knowledge here of what is going to happen. Okay, chapter 11. We're not going to finish this. Let's look ahead in your Bible for a second. See what you see on the page there. I'm sure you all are very familiar with Daniel chapter 11. No, it's what we skip over, and you go and you're like, oh, wow, this is 45 verses. We're not going to do all of it. We're going to strategically stop at a certain point. I promise you that. But here's where I sent that email out earlier, because there's a lot of history in this. One more time, this is where it might be helpful to turn to, I can't remember what pages I said, 23 through 24. I kind of gave you like the answers. Again, that's a dangerous thing to do when you're talking about Bible interpretation. But I'll give you what I suggest is probably the best historical verse with the verses, or historical event with the verses, everything like that. But let's zoom out really quickly. Daniel's going to be told about what is coming in these latter days. That means the things that we should be looking for is where's the hope, and where's God's people, and what are God's people doing to show that they believe that God is in control. At the end of the day, that's all we need to be focusing on, and not getting too consumed and caught up with the history. But I'm happy to share that with you as we go on through. So we're going to notice here in the beginning, we're going to talk about Persian kings, of which Darius, Cyrus are one, right? And we're going to talk other ones. We're going to talk about Greek kings, because that's the kingdom that comes after that. And we're going to talk, we see that there was the Prince of Persia, Prince of Greece coming. But in that, we're going to get all this talk about kings of the south and kings of the north. Over and over and over again. This king of the south and king of the north is not one person. So I think that would be helpful to take note of. But they are from the same place. So that's north-south. That's why it's discussed that way. But really our focus is going to be, as we get through these kind of three main parts of this section here, is going to be Antiochus IV. If you remember him back from Daniel chapter 8, we discussed for a little bit there. That little horn, that boastful one, right? But even he becomes somewhat of a pattern for what we see maybe later to come. I don't want us to worry about memorizing names. I don't want you worrying about taking too many notes, but I do want you to pause me as we go along the way. Well, let's kind of go verse by verse and section by section and see what you take note of here. But this is where you lose some people than Daniel if you haven't already been lost. So in these historical happenings here, let's discuss this. So let's read the first 4 verses. And then you tell me what you take note of. Patterns, the message, anything you can derive from that. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. This is the messenger, heavenly messenger talking here. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia, and then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them as soon as he becomes strong through his riches. He will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece, and a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he is risen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not of his own to his own descendants, not according to his authority, which he wielded for his sovereignty, will be uprooted and given to others besides them. Guesses here. What are we talking about? One we could be sure of. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So we have Alexander the Great. How do we know that? Well, we know that from history, but how do we know that from Daniel? Yeah, we do get that word, kind of mighty king. Notice in verse 3, do as he pleases. We use that same phrase to talk about Alexander the Great or Greece back in Daniel chapter 8. This one is going to be coming and doing what he pleases. Remember as we had those horns in Daniel chapter 8 come up? We had one big horn, and then it shattered and did what? 4, right? is that not what we see here too? And they go to all areas of the world, right? The compass, kind of the picture there. So we know that piece. Now we're like, okay, well, how do we fill in the blanks before then? We know that this is during the time of Cyrus. Guess who Cyrus is in this list of Persian kings? He is number 1, right? So we get Darius the Mede again being corresponding with that first year of Cyrus's, year on the throne, where we had the fall of Babylon. That's like 539, and then we're just going to go on from there, moving on forward. We get a picture of these 4 more Persian kings, and I want you to see something really quickly as we do this. It's not just like, oh, here's an interpretation. It's the precision of this interpretation, or the precision of the prophecy that we have before here. Daniel doesn't know any other Persian emperors besides Cyrus, but here comes some more. We know that goes in this pretty direct order. We have Cambyses II, who goes and conquers Egypt, which we'll see is an important thing later on. We know that we have another usurper, right? You have Pseudo-Smerdis or Bardia. We talked a little bit about these, I think, back in our other Ezra and Nehemiah class. We have Darius I, Darius the Great, which we should know him because during that time of 522 to 486 is when the temple was rebuilt. And we have him recorded there in the writings of Ezra. And so, and Haggai as well. Well, leading into that. So there's 3. But what does it say there? Not just 3. And then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. And we know pretty strongly from history who that is. So it's Xerxes, the first, also known as Ahasuerus, which you might know from Esther, right? We see this in history. He does accumulate a lot of wealth. But notice what's really important about Ahasuerus. It's not just that he has a lot of money, gains a lot of wealth and prosperity for the nation. How does he funnel and use that wealth? Yeah, tries to take over Greece. And he fails. Actually, he succeeds in making them really angry. And then that gets Alexander the Great later on to come get. But here's the thing. Alexander the Great does not come until, I think, 100 and something years later after this. So when we read these verses, we have to understand sometimes we have long periods of time. Sometimes we have short periods of time. Like right between verse 2 and 3, there's over 100 years, right? But then, as we go through all of that, we'll take note of a couple different things here. We already talked about this Greek Empire. We know Alexander the Great is going to rise up. We see that he's also going to quickly fall, as we see in verse 4. Pretty much a summary of what we saw in chapter 8. We have, again, not names you need to remember, at least not all 4 of them, but we have 4 horns that arise. 2 of them are really important because we think of the 4 areas of the compass of the world. Do we really need to be so much concerned with what's happening over in the West when you're God's people? Not yet, of course. Wait till you get to the New Testament, sure. But we have Israel positioned right on the coast there of the Mediterranean. Worry about who's coming up above them and who's coming down below them, right? North and the south. Seleucus the first is going to be in the east, but really kind of transitions from the north because you can't cross the desert, if we'll look at a map in a second. And then Ptolemy in the south. When I hear Ptolemies, think Egyptians, but not really Egyptians because they're Greek. This is in the Egyptian area. 2 names we know, and guess what we have there? We have Seleucids, who are in the north, kings of the north, and the Ptolemies, who are the kings of the south. How are you feeling about that? Yeah, that's Daniel chapter 11. They fought forever. So really, that you could probably get away with knowing mainly that. Again, I don't know how helpful this is or how much you can even see, but you know where Israel is, right there on the coast of the Mediterranean. In the darker blue color there in Egypt, that's where, again, the Ptolemies would be, and the Seleucids is pretty like east going all the way to the north. And ultimately, their base of operations, Antioch. You know what Antioch is named after? Antiochus, right? And we see a lot of Antiochs, even multiple Antiochs, because Antiochus, the first, second, third, and fourth, as we'll get to them, and even more after that, kind of amassed this power in these areas. So the reason why we're going through this too, besides the fact that it's in the Bible in general, because this lays the groundwork for what we see in the New Testament. And it's hard for us to see and understand that. But part of the reason why we have different factions within Judaism, different sects, is because some are very much against these powers that are in these areas. I mean, these are far long gone by the time we come to the New Testament with Rome. But also others recognize their way of fighting against this is not against with warfare. It's by being really strict according to the law. I mean, this is planting the seeds for Pharisees. This is planting the seeds for the Zealots. This is planting the seeds for all the other things that we see in the New Testament. So I don't want us to lose sight of that either. Yes?
Critical thing to us in the spread of the gospel was Hellenization. Because it made
Yes.
the street Greek the common person, the language of the world.
Yes. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because when we say Hellenization, what does that mean? We're talking about Greek, right? Remember, yes, they're in like Persia or they're in Egypt, but they're Greek. They're spreading a Hellenistic culture. And so when you see that like divide of like, those who are trying to be more of the Judean culture versus the Hellenistic culture in the New Testament, that's where this comes from too. We do have to keep that in mind. When we say Hellenization, it does come with a lot of paganness too. Okay. Let's keep reading and see if we can at least get down a little bit farther, and then I promise you I'll give you a break there, because I know it's a lot to take in and focus in on. But verse 5, first time we see king of the south. Remember, Ptolemies, they're coming from Egypt. So when the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion, his dominion will be a great dominion indeed. After some years, it will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement, but she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, as well as the one who supported her in those times. But one of the descendants of her line will rise in his place, and he will come against their army, enter the fortress of the king of the north. He will deal with them and display great strength. Also their gods with metal images and their precious vessels as silver and gold he will take into captivity to Egypt, and he on his part will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years, and the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, will return to his own land. I know you're reading that and you're feeling very encouraged. Except, well, what do you notice there? Anything. If we're trying to apply the themes and the principles of Daniel as a whole to what we just read, besides trying not to get too confused, what do we see happening? Okay, God is in control. And how does this paint a perfect portrait of that?
He knows where the kings are going to go and where the queens are going to go and when they're going to fall.
So this is the knowledge that we have here, very specific, right? This is like it's like a soap opera. This is like human drama. If we go on through, I'll kind of skip through some of this really quickly so you get this picture. Yeah, we have Ptolemy the first and Seleucid, the first of Syria there, kings of the north, kings of the south. We have all that there. There's wars going on. Wars, yeah, it's a very human thing, but also we know it's going on in the spiritual realm as well. You got some poisonings going on here as we get to verse 6. You get some intermarriages, because how do you create peace? Oh, we got to marry off one of the daughters from Egypt, and that's what happens. Well, because he married the daughter of Egypt, Bernice here, he put away his wife Laodicea, which is where we get Laodicea, by the way, and then he decides, I'm going to take back my old wife. And it just goes on, and then that makes Bernice mad, and so she tries to get her brother to come. It just keeps on going and going as we look through all these. It's war after war, human drama after human drama. It's power struggles all over. What's the end result, though? God knows what's going to happen. This is still leading into how he is going to bring about and establish his people and bring about the Messiah, right? Yeah, awesome.
Just that each of these sections, it seems like you've got somebody that rises in power.
Yeah.
And then I feel like there's a lot of hope there that whoever it is that's rising in power,
Exactly. Over and over. And it's no different even today. Y'all mind if I zoom through some of the dates and stuff like that?
Just one note
Yeah.
about that, that's a familiar theme, should be a familiar theme for Daniel, and that's what happened to the kings of Israel and Judah before they got there. Was the marriage, intermarriage,
Oh, yeah.
and poisoning, and
Oh, yeah.
stabbing, and
Yeah, Israel was not immune to the very same thing. They look a lot like the nations here, don't they? Let's read these last couple sections, because I want to get to one final point so we can be done for today, and then we'll have to pick up with the next, and probably group it with chapter 12, since chapter 12 is shorter. But read with me in verse 10 and onward. Again, it doesn't even matter necessarily who these people are exactly, although we can pinpoint those names. That's the very same reason why people fight against Daniel being authentic, because he's almost too precise. God is too precise in his prophecies. Yet this is very precise. We can point to almost every single thing here and say this is what happened in history. Verse 10, his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through them, that he may again wage war up to his very fortress. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north, and the latter will raise a great multitude, and that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. When the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. For the king of the north will raise a greater multitude than the former, and after an interval of some years, it will press on with a great army and much equipment. It's like armies, more numbers, like it does nothing, right? It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. In the moment, the people are thinking that. In the moment, we look at the world around us and we think of like, oh, this nuclear armament and that thing, and then we're going to mass this weapon, and we're going to, what does it amount to? Keep on reading, because this is where I want us to end. Verse 14. Now in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. And the king of the north will come up and cast a siege ramp and offer a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south will not stand their ground, not even their choicest troops, but there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him. He will also stay for a time in the beautiful land with destruction in his hand. He will set his face to come with the power of his whole kingdom, bringing him a proposal of peace, which he'll put into effect. It will also give the daughter of women to ruin it, and she will not take a stand for him or be on his side. And then he'll turn his face to the coastlands and capture many. Pause there for a second. We're trying it all the way over again. Well, maybe this marriage alliance will work. No, it doesn't, right? Maybe this peace treaty will work. No, it doesn't. But notice who gets involved in this section here. Anything stand out to you? Something different? Something new? The violent among your people. Remember what we're trying to figure out here. Remember what the encouragement to Daniel is. How do you live in a way that demonstrates that God is in control? Generally speaking, we're not a violent people, so our minds might go there, although you might want to be careful with that statement, because maybe we actually are more than we realize. But notice what it says. The violent among your people will also lift themselves up. They align themselves, and we have this in history. Some of the Jews go with Seleucid to fight against the Egyptians or fight against the Ptolemies. Was that the right thing to do? It says they were doing it in order to fulfill the vision. But did they? Was that how God intended for this vision to be fulfilled? Is this how we function and live in a way that demonstrates that God is in control? Is it through violence? Yeah. No. If God was with them in that sense, that's how he wanted to go about it, that wouldn't have happened. And I think as we look at this, and really the rest of the book of Daniel, especially chapter 11, we're left with the question that, okay, if violence isn't the way in which we're going to accomplish this and God's restoration of all things, then what is the answer? What is the answer? How is that vision going to be fulfilled? We don't get that until we get to chapter 12. But we do have to come to a great conflict first. But even in those great conflicts, there are things that they could be doing, and even we can find ourselves doing, that are taking place in part in that battle It's not through violence. It's through prayer, like Daniel offered. It's through taking courage, understanding that God is in control, and acting in such a way that demonstrates that, right? Thanks for your patience. And be patient and steadfast for the day of the Lord is coming, right? He's coming in. Okay, we'll pick back up on the rest of chapter 11 and lead right into chapter 12, which is the most important part of the book, in my opinion, but we will get there. Thank you for sitting through the history lesson.